By exposing this document, he exposed the single most highly classified document in Israel's possession. And Bibi Netanyahu is in a lot of trouble, a lot of legal trouble right now. And you saw the chief of staff go, what?
Hezbollah has been absolutely beating Israeli forces back. They've hit Israel's Ministry of Defense. In southern Lebanon, they have taken out upwards of 10 IDF troops inside of a residential building that was booby-trapped. All of this is coming as we're waiting Iran's strike. Scott, what do you make of these recent developments that are taking place?
Well, I mean, I've said from the very beginning of this that Hezbollah has been preparing for this kind of conflict with Israel since 2006, when the last large-scale conflict between Hezbollah and Israel took place for 18 years, brain math. Hezbollah has been anticipating what Israel would do. They've done what is known as intelligence preparation of the battlefield. They've looked at the terrain. They can predict, avenues of approach, terrain that Israel can advance on, terrain that is defensible, where they need to be to fire their mortars to hit a specific target, pre-targeting everything. So Israel's literally walking into an ambush. Every meter they advance further into southern Lebanon, it's 1 meter deeper into an ambush that has been prepared for 18 years by Hezbollah. Israel made a lot of talk about the damage that they've done to Hezbollah, and they have done damage. But again, Hezbollah is a professional organization that knows very well what Israel's capabilities are. Nothing Israel did, I guess the pager attack took them by surprise, but nothing Israel is doing now in terms of bombing took Hezbollah by surprise. Hezbollah knew that Israel would attack, take advantage of their supremacy in the air to drop bombs. Hezbollah has hardened its targets. What we see Hezbollah doing now is they've reconstituted their mid to senior level leadership. Their lower ranks, the fighting ranks, are intact, and we see Hezbollah doing what they've always done, managing escalation. Rather than Israel having destroyed the totality of Hezbollah's ballistic missile capability, which the IDF wanted people to believe, we see Hezbollah every day rolling out new capabilities that Israel can't defend against. And this is just part and parcel of the reality that Israel cannot defeat Hezbollah. And if this war continues, we may see Hezbollah actually achieve the strategic defeat of Israel. And in 2006, Hezbollah won by surviving. Israel said that their goal was to defeat Hezbollah, and they failed to defeat Hezbollah. Therefore, Hezbollah, by default, won. This time around, not only is Israel not defeating Hezbollah, but Hezbollah is defeating Israel. That is, Israel is being defeated tactically, operationally, and strategically by Hezbollah. This is a completely different outcome, and Israel has to be shocked by this, because they've delivered the best shot they could deliver against Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is not phased. Hezbollah is still standing. Hezbollah is strong and getting stronger every day.
Hezbollah announced that they are ready for an expanded ground operation that Israel is saying that they're ready to conduct. But throughout this whole time, right around the time that Iran struck Israel, the beginning of October, Israel has been engaged in this ground operation. And according to Hezbollah, they have not been able to occupy or maintain or keep any village. And I think that the strike today really demonstrates just how perilous the situation is for Israel. And so I'm curious, Scott, Iran is patiently waiting, not making any moves right now, but it has said quite openly that not only is Hezbollah alive, but it is fighting back hard. What do you make of what's to come as Donald Trump is going to take office in a few months? What do you see as the trajectory with regard to Israel as it struggles mightily against Hezbollah?
Well, I think the Iranians are capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time. And what I mean by that is that they can assess the reality of the Israeli struggle with Hezbollah separately from the new reality of President-elect Donald Trump, that the two aren't necessarily linked. I believe that the Iranians are prepared to engage in constructive dialogue with the new Trump administration if the Trump administration is interested in such a dialogue. Based upon some of the appointments that Donald Trump has made, the nominations for certain national security posts, it's clearly that it's staffed with overwhelming numbers of pro-Israel, anti-Iranian personalities. But Donald Trump has said he's not looking for a war with Iran. He has said that his posture is peace through strength. And so there's a chance that he's just posturing to, appear to have a strong face, that he will work with Iran to achieve an end to this cycle of violence that doesn't require escalation. One must always hold out hope for this. And I think the Iranians would be wise to keep the door open for Trump to come in and talk to them. But the fact of the matter is, Israel has articulated very aggressive intent towards Iran, and the Iranians would be fools not to be prepared to respond to that either proactively or reactively. Right now, Iran, I believe, is prepared to deliver a massive strike against Israel that would be debilitating, absolutely devastating for Israel. But you have to ask the question, why? Why would Iran do that? Hezbollah has the upper hand right now. Hezbollah has achieved, operational dominance over Israel in southern Lebanon. There's no reason for Iran to come in and weigh in on this aspect of the fight. Hezbollah is winning, and Hezbollah's victory, again, is a managed escalation conflict that keeps the attention where everybody that is in opposition to Israel agrees it needs to be, on Gaza, on Hamas, on the struggle for an independent Palestine. The last thing the Free Palestine cause needs is a massive regional conflict between Iran, Israel, and the United States that destabilizes the global economy and shifts attention decisively away from the creation of a Palestinian state towards a larger global problem, that is energy security and the need to bring that conflict to an end. So, the Iranians have always said that, they're supporting the Palestinian people, they're supporting Hamas. And right now, I think the strategic understanding is the best way to support Hamas in Palestine is by not attacking Israel. And I think that's the direction Iran appears to be leaning at this point in time.
At the moment, Israel appears to be struggling quite mightily with Hezbollah alone. Talk about this context, because you have Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu really throwing out a lot of bluster, saying that they're going to expand operations on the ground and they're going to continue to maintain this bombing campaign, which has been absolutely devastating for the Lebanese people. Yet it appears that Hezbollah is just being given more opportunities to show their strength. So I'm curious, Scott, if you could talk about this context, like how does this happen, given the fact we are presented with, in the Western media, we get very little attention to anything but very small reports about the devastation happening in Lebanon. But from the outside looking in, a lot of people might look at this as Israel is causing a lot of devastation, wreaking a lot of havoc. How is it then that the Lebanese resistance is able to maintain and even up the ante with its own response and fight back?
Well, first of all, again, we have to acknowledge that what Israel is doing in southern Lebanon and what Israel is doing in Gaza is not something new. It's a continuation of previously articulated policies, the Dhaiphong doctrine, literally the southern suburb of Beirut that's being obliterated today by Israel. This policy is a policy of collective punishment that Israel began in 2006 and has expanded upon since then. And they are applying it in Gaza with horrific force. This is background noise by this time. I mean, the world has unfortunately become numb to the images of the dead women and children, the dead civilians, the innocents that are being slaughtered on a daily basis by Israel. It's just not shocking as it once was, because people are just numb to it. But then we have the case of Hezbollah's continued resistance. Anybody who has studied Hezbollah, anybody who has studied how Nasrallah prepared for this, understands that this was always going to be the case, that Israel was never going to defeat Hezbollah. And it's playing out as we speak. But I think the most important thing is the context of all this. We're speaking as if Israel is seeking policies that are linked to the legitimate national security of Israel. This is wrong. Everything Israel does today is linked to the political survival of Benjamin Netanyahu. There's a story that's out there right now. I don't know. Do you follow Seymour Hersh's Substack?
I do, but I have not seen this one.
Well, most recently he published an article either early today or late yesterday. Fascinating article about what Bibi Netanyahu has been doing. And Bibi Netanyahu is in a lot of trouble, a lot of legal trouble right now, because if you remember, he did that briefing a little while ago where he talked about the hostages, and he said that Hamas was never serious about releasing the hostages, that Hamas sabotaged everything. And he put a document up there. The first thing is, by exposing this document, he exposed what Seymour Hersh has said is the single most highly classified document in Israel possession. It's a document they captured early on during the Gaza operation that details Hamas's strategic intent regarding October 7th. But one of the things that Netanyahu was saying about this document is that it shows that that Hamas was never serious about releasing the hostages, because this document says that Sinwar was going to flee to Egypt with his family and the hostages and take them onwards to Iran. And this is what Netanyahu was talking about. So first of all, he revealed the existence of this extraordinarily classified document, which is a violation of the law. So he's in trouble for that. But he's also in trouble because he lied, because the document doesn't say that. The next 2 pages, which Netanyahu didn't talk about, it's a 12-page document apparently. The next 2 pages show that this was something suggested to Sinwar, but that Sinwar rejected it out of hand, that Sinwar was going to stay there, that Sinwar was actively looking for a deal with Israel that would trade return of the hostages for a ceasefire, that it wasn't Hamas that sabotaged this, it was Benjamin Netanyahu. So now there's a judge that has signed off on investigations into Netanyahu's lying. And it gets worse than that. How did Netanyahu gain access to this document? Who went into this secure space and retrieved the document in total violation of the law? If you remember, Sandy Berger went into the National Archives at one point in time to retrieve a document that put the Clinton administration in a bad light, and he put those documents in his underwear and tried to smuggle them out. And he got in a lot of trouble for that. Well, this is what we're talking about here, a total violation of security protocols, etc. But this underscores the reality that Netanyahu isn't doing anything for Israel or the Israeli people. He's doing everything to further his political legacy, up to including stealing classified information, illegally presenting it to the Israeli population, and lying about the true meaning of these documents to disguise the fact that he is the one who undermined, that he's the one that made the decision. We are not going into a deal to release the hostages. And this will only further, fracture Israeli society. This is one of the things that I don't think the West is picking up on. Let's put it this way. If Iran was as fractured as Israel's society is, where you had the Iranian military marching in the street, talking about a coup d'etat against the Iranian president and the supreme leader, where you had the parliament in open fighting against one another, the president plotting against the prime minister, et cetera, people would say Iran's on the verge of collapse. That would be the headline news everywhere. Well, that's all happening in Israel, and nobody's talking about it. Everybody's acting as if Israel is a stable democracy. Israel is not a stable democracy. Israel is a military dictatorship that is collapsing from within. And there's a whole bunch of deep fractures and fissures that are going to be, further exacerbated by these events, including the fact that Netanyahu is under a new criminal investigation for some very serious crimes.
It seems the more that Netanyahu and that the Israeli regime attempts to legitimize itself through this absolutely unhinged aggression in Lebanon, trying to take on Hezbollah, trying to confront Iran? I've heard you talk about the United States having the capacity to come in and create havoc in Iran should Israel need that assistance. Of course, you've also mentioned and just how much of an impact that would have on the world. Scott, is this kind of sowing the seeds, like fulfilling the prophecy, the attempts to re-legitimize through trying to confront Hezbollah, through expanding all of these operations and trying to take on Iran? Doesn't this just sow the seeds for the collapse that Netanyahu appears to be trying to avoid?
What's interesting is that Israel in 2022 and 2023 conducted military exercises, large-scale military exercises. I think the one in 2023 was called Operation Chariots of Fire. There was a stress test of the Israeli Defense Forces' ability to defend Israel against attacks from all of its enemies at the same time. Now, the irony here is that Israel never considered that in their thinking that the attacks that would come would be triggered by an attack by Hamas that would inflict serious harm on Israel and require Israel to mobilize 300,000 troops and deploy them into Gaza. That wasn't part of the plan. The Israelis always believed that Gaza and the West Bank would be involved in an intifada type uprising where you could handle it with tens of thousands of border police, maybe some soldiers, but that it would be a secondary issue compared to the main fighting against Hezbollah, Syria, and Iran. But even in with that scenario, with the condition that Hamas wasn't engaged decisively, Israel lost every time. Every time. The only way Israel could take on Iran was with extensive American military support. And that's been something that Israel's been trying to coerce from the United States since the beginning of this conflict, the United States to commit to taking on Iran, something the United States to date refuses to do. But the reason why I bring this up is that what's happening right now is that Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to turn that plan, fighting everybody at once, into victory, even though he knows that when it was tested before the war, Israel couldn't win. And that this current iteration, Israel started off by weakening itself in Gaza and never recovered. By the time they ended up engaging with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, the Israeli military was already exhausted. They had run out of spare parts for their tanks. The Merkava 4 tanks were being cannibalized. They had to stop the sale of Merkava 3 tanks to Morocco and other places so that they could use them as replacement tanks. And that's what you see a lot right now is upgraded Merkava 3 tanks because they've run out of Merkava 4 tanks. The Israeli soldiers have never been prepared for a war that lasted more than a year. The Israeli army was always configured to fight short, sharp engagements where they would overwhelm their enemy with firepower and technology. And here we are now, more than a year plus, into a conflict, and the Israeli army is just exhausted morally, physically. The desertion rates are sky high. Some Israeli generals are talking about 12 to 24%, depending on the unit. You have reservists starting to commit suicide rather than report to their units. You have soldiers' morales collapse because they're being asked to go into Gaza and recapture the same territory for the third time. Territory that's already stained with the blood of their comrades, and now they have to go back in and do it again. It's a never-ending fight. The Israelis can't advance in southern Lebanon. It's a death trap. Israelis don't want to go into southern Lebanon. Israelis don't want to go into Gaza. So the military, I don't know if you saw when Israel Katz went in and started briefing, the chief of staff Halevi and other officers, and for the first time he said, "Our goal is to, defeat Hezbollah and disarm them." And you saw the chief of staff go, "What? That's never been our goal. We can't achieve that goal. It's an impossible goal to achieve." But that's the difference between politics, and Israel Katz is a politician loyal to Netanyahu, so he's reading off the Netanyahu playbook, the fiction of the Netanyahu playbook, and the reality that is known by the Israeli generals that this isn't going to happen. But Netanyahu continues to, pontificate and enunciate this this kind of policy, because this isn't about the survival of Israel. This is about the survival of Netanyahu. He cares about his political legacy, and apparently he's willing to sell Israel, down the river to have a chance at emerging from this crisis with his reputation intact. I think I don't think it's going to happen. I think that the Israelis are going to remove him from power soon. They have no choice, because these policies can't work in the military. You can't, make success happen when you don't have the assets, the resources, the plan, the strategic vision to facilitate that. And that's where the Israeli military is. I think we're in a situation where Netanyahu has fatally wounded Israel. That there's no recovering from this, and there's more and more Israeli generals and politicians that are coming to this conclusion. I've heard them speak it. They, the economy is in, a free fall. It's not going to recover. $67 billion hit last year, on the way towards more than $1 billion. This isn't the cost of the war. This is what the economy isn't earning. 60,000 civilians, evicted from the north. Netanyahu said we're going to war in Lebanon to get them to go back. They aren't going home. Tens of thousands more have had to leave because of what Hezbollah is doing, the continued attacks. The port of Eilat is shut down. Haifa is likewise shutting down because you can't ensure shipping as they move into a harbor where you have Hezbollah missiles and drones striking at will. Israel is deeply divided. Even before October 7th, you had hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the street condemning Netanyahu for trying to rewrite Israeli basic law so that the politically aligned Knesset could control the judiciary. Why? So that nobody could try and convict Netanyahu on the corruption charges. He has been indicted for corruption, real corruption, the kind of corruption he'll be found guilty of and spend the rest of his life in jail. So he's trying to manipulate the courts so that he can't be tried. Hundreds of thousands of people protested against that. You now have hundreds of thousands of people protesting against the fact that he hasn't brought the hostages home. And now you're going to have tens of thousands more jump in on that, protesting his firing of the defense minister Gallant. Israel is a nation literally on the cusp of civil war.